Hi, I'm B from Nectar Mechanics, and in today's video, we're going to be making my very own Cyberpunk arm. So I really love the Cyberpunk aesthetic. I've dabbled in it before in the past. I've made a robot helmet, I've made the mask and stuff like that, but I've never tried making something like an arm. With Cyberpunk, you only really need to just get the aesthetic right, yeah? Like metal and sort of bits and bobs like that. It can be my own design, it could be whatever, and no one can tell me I got it wrong. To start off with this project, I don't really want to say what I did, but I guess I should. Basically, I made the worst mistake you can ever make. I assumed I knew better. Okay, so I need a mold of sorts, right? So I know that what I'm building is the right size, and I don't really fancy hot gluing my arm to cardboard just to find out. So I figured I'd make a duct tape mold, right? This is like a fairly common cosplay thing, right? You wrap yourself in duct tape, and then you take it off and you've got a duct tape shell. See, what you're supposed to do is you wrap yourself in cellophane, and then you wrap yourself in gaffer tape, right? The point of this is that the cellophane means that nothing can stick to your skin, and gaffer tape is actually made of kind of like a fabricy substance, so it can stretch a little bit. Duct tape is just plastic and it has no stretch and give. My little brain went, ooh, well, if it's just to stop it sticking, it won't matter. I'm using really cheap duct tape that doesn't stick very well, so I'll be just fine. Exactly what you think happened. Turns out my cheap, non-sticking duct tape started to stick really well. Thankfully, I was able to cut myself out of it and, not have anything particularly major. So this goes to a warning for all of you. Do the steps properly, make sure you're in a safe environment, and take care of yourself. So after that fun little adventure, it was time to actually begin construction. All I did is I cut the duct tape into two segments, upper arm, lower arm, and then I cut it down the middle so that I could lay it flat. I then wrapped it over my cardboard and started tracing it out. Now, I'm using cornflake cardboard because the slight plasticity on the outside means that it's a bit stronger than other cardboard. It also doesn't have any corrugations and is thin, so it's light and strong. If you get moisture on it, it can go a bit fuzzy, but for the most part, it's great. So once it was all traced out onto the cardboard, it was time to start wrapping and folding it to get it to fit my arm. Now, because my duct tape mold was so tight, so was the cardboard. So there was a couple of adjustments trying to just add a little bit of extra give, but eventually I got it to a stage where I could just pressure fit it on. Now ideally, I want this arm to kind of be one sort of sleeve that I can slide on and off. So that means I need to connect the upper arm to the lower arm with joints. Now if I just use cardboard for this, it's gonna wear out pretty quick. So I actually used some plastic just off of some toy packaging and then wrapped it in a layer of cardboard so it had the same texture. Then I could just stab a screw through it and into the arm, and if I did that on both sides, then I was able to get a decent elbow. Now, using screws like this is strong, but a little bit terrifying having something spiky like that sticking out my arm. So in the end, I just used push pins. Now again, this movement is not one-to-one to my normal arm, but it's better than it being static. Now, as I'm going along, I don't necessarily have a strict design that I'm following. I don't have a piece of art or anything, I'm completely winging it. What I do know is that I want to have cool, funky shapes that sort of lay over the cardboard. So I'm just adding these panels over the top of the base structure that not only gives it strength, but also looks kind of cool. And again, it's like a weird random hodgepodge, and the more layers and bits that we add, the more shading and stuff we're going to get to give it when we weather. So more depth is better. And of course, milk caps. We need milk caps. I have dozens of them, and I need to get rid of them, so I'm going to use them on every project I can. Now we're going to come back and do some more detailing in a bit, but we need the hand sorted. The hand is going to be a bit tricky. Originally, the hand was going to have just two fingers, like my futuristic robot costume, but I realized that's just going to make it look more alien and robot, whereas I want it to be more like cyborg human-y, so the normal amount of fingers was appropriate. So what I did is I traced my hand out onto a flat sheet of cardboard and started cutting it all up into sections. Then I would wrap cardboard around my hand, use a pencil to sort of figure out where it needed to be glued, and then lots of test fitting. Now the fingers I actually made out of cardboard initially using a piece of fabric on the outside. I did a few things wrong here. Fabric on the outside of the hand meant that when I bent, it was pulling on the fabric, and since it wasn't elastic, it didn't stretch. So that would mean the cardboard ripped. Cardboard is not really strong enough for that sort of thing, especially just a single layer. So I decided to use that same toy plastic from earlier. This wasn't perfect either. The hot glue can sort of deform and warp the plastic, but seeing as I'm going to be weathering it later anyway, it doesn't have to be pristine. Then I would just get some sewing elastic and put it on the outside and inside to try and force it into that straight position all the time. My fingers, even though I've measured it and got it as best as I can, still don't fully fit perfectly, which means they can go a bit wonky and weird, so the elastic forces it to at least look semi-natural. Then the hand gets attached to the rest of the arm with tiny little bits of elastic. These are just tiny elastic cords that I have laying around, and if I do them on the inside of the palm and on the outside of the hand, then it means I'm still going to have a ton of wrist movement. Now I know I got a lot of gaps in this costume, and that is for the movement. If there is an empty void of space, it means my hand and arm can move into that void of space. Yes, it looks kind of gappy. Yes, I wish that I could do more layers and plates and stuff, but this is the only way I'm going to get it at least semi-comfortable and semi-usable. So that's all of the base construction done. Now it is time for the detailing. And for that, I wanted to do lots and lots of layering. Like I said, lots of little tiny cutouts and plates, a bit like I did with my Junkion diorama. Essentially just making random shapes, curving them so they fit the contour of the base construction, and then I would glue it on. I'm trying to do thin layers of glue and cardboard just to keep it relatively light, but also if you do at least 2 layers of cardboard, it's gonna be pretty strong. I also did some fun things like using wood filler for detailing. I had this sort of plasticky mesh that I used on the Cyberpunk mask a few months back, and I realized if I stretched that and squished it onto wood filler, it would leave a pattern indent, a bit like a texture roller. That meant I could get some cool, fun, bubbly details. And then I would again cover that in cardboard so that it was inset. It's all about the depth. And when I say depth, I don't mean that we're having huge gaps and stuff. It just means that you have clear edge lines, a bit like Gundams, right? So then when I get to do the painting later on and I do the washes, that's really gonna emphasize it. So, some final details was random plastic tubing I had lying around, a cardboard mid-elbow band just to have a little bit less of a gap, more milk caps, plus a little bit of duct tape wiring. I figured that I'm not going to be wearing this arm all the time, so it'd be kind of fun to look like it had some cabling coming off the edge. It's not perfect, but it gets the point across. So now it is time for the painting, and this is, I think, the quickest paint job I've ever had on a model. See, I got some Rust-Oleum specialty metallic paint, and basically it's a metallic spray paint that's really, really good at coating. I did 0 primer on any of this, and it covered the plastic, the cardboard, the glue, all perfectly, no chippage, no anything, and it was dry in just a few hours. So now that we got the spray paint done, it's time for my favorite part of any build, the weathering. For this, I'm trying to keep it super simple. I want it to be grunged up and dirty like real metal, but I also don't want to make it like it's been through the wars, because any clothes that I wear with it that I don't necessarily want to weather as well, it's not gonna match. So for this, I just did some basic black washes, which, for those that don't know, is where you get your black paint, you water it down, and then you lather it all over the model, and then basically dab all of it off again. This does exactly what I was saying earlier, which is that all the paint gets into the crevices of it and sort of adds shading, a bit like a cartoon. And especially with things like metal, you want to really grunge it up. You can add some browns and stuff if you want to, but for this, I just kept it simple black. Once that was done, I did dry brushing, which is where you get your paintbrush covered in paint, wipe most of it off on the paper towel, and then ever so slightly hit the edges of the model. I just did some solid white, and again, not a huge amount. Normally you would do things like metallics and stuff to sort of be like paint chippage, but since this is meant to be raw metal and no paint, it's going to be more like scuffs and bumps that it's got along the way. Finally, I just painted the cords some funky RGB colors, so red, green, blue, just to give it that C-3PO tummy wire effect. It's really simple, but everyone kind of recognizes it immediately and gives it a cool look. And I did do this to all of the cables at the top, and yes, it did take me a while doing the front and back of all of them. And now that the painting is done, it's time for the glamour shots. You took my arm. It's only fair I take yours. Doesn't that arm look brilliant? Thank you, Mum, for the makeover. I think it looks great. I can't necessarily move 100% like I originally wanted, but I got some pretty good posing out of that. It's really fun getting to mess around just having the arm on. Now, it didn't fully stand up to the wear and tear that I was giving it. A couple pieces kind of fell off and I'm gonna have to repair it, but that's fine. That happens with all cosplays. That's what I get for using cardboard all the time. So I finally made a piece of cosplay that isn't just a helmet, and I really enjoyed this process. I really want to do more of it. So stay tuned for more potential Cyberpunk stuff along the way. I've got a broken glue gun that I feel could become a sci-fi blaster at some point. So if you like what you saw and you want to see more, then feel free to subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Farewell!